All right, Gwen, good to go?
Yeah.
Here we go.
So our project was to integrate Drupal and within chatbot, and we did this with by connecting Drupal and Dialogflow. Um, we wanted to integrate Drupal with Dialogflow because both Pine Tree Legal Assistance and Jack and Brian Dyer Stewart are both part of this team, and Illinois Legal Aid Online, where I work, run Drupal-based websites that have a wealth of legal content, organization data, user profile data, at least on our site. And by integrating Dialogflow and chatbots with Drupal, then we can do anything inside of Drupal while interacting through a chatbot. So we can have somebody use a chatbot and have Drupal, as a result of that, create a piece of content or send an email out through the system, or even gather enough data from the chatbot to e-transfer into an intake at the legal server. That's just some of the examples. Our project scope, though, was a proof of concept. Can we get a Dialogflow request into Drupal, parse it into something that Drupal can deal with, do something with it, and then return a valid response to Dialogflow? We ran into a couple of challenges particularly with Drupal 8. The chatbot API has not kept up with Dialogflow, and so we weren't able to use it, but we were able to make it work anyway. So the steps to doing this is you create an app in Dialogflow, add one or more intents, we created the Drupal module to accept the dialog request and respond to it, and then map that Drupal page to Dialogflow. The code is up on GitHub. The link is in the presentation, which is attached to the Trello board. And I'm going to walk you through. I did one that is a legal self-help center locator. And let me move my screen over enough so hopefully you can see. If I type in, I need legal help, it'll come back, I hope, and asks me for my zip code. So I'm going to tell them I'm in 60505. And it comes back and tells me the King County Law Library is the nearest self-help center. If I try it again with, I need a lawyer, and I'm going to put in the main zip code, it's going to come back and tell me that it's not a valid Illinois zip code and to visit lst.gov for legal help. And on the Illinois side, it's actually pulling data from the statewide website to determine what the correct legal self-help center is. We also did, and there's a video of this the demo attached to the PowerPoint as well. We also did a sort of an info demo where we can where we created a housing intent, trained it with various terms related to eviction, foreclosure, and lockouts. And if I try a sentence like, I can't pay my rent, it's going to come back and give me some information about when a landlord can evict me. If I say my landlord changed the locks, or let my landlord lock me out, it comes back with legal content related to a lockout, also pulled from Aleo's content. And there's a video of that as well. And that's our project. We did this we have modules for both Drupal 7 and Drupal 8. Once we got the 7 working, 8 was easy.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gwen. This is Abhijit. And we will have questions at the end of all presentations. So if you have any questions, feel free to write them down for now. And then once we have a question and answer session, we'll have all the questions for all the participants. Moving on to the next project. This one is a chatbot to assist Florida youth aging out of foster care. And I actually worked on this project along with a few others. So I'd like to have Jessica Ray start us off with the presentation. Jessica?
Great. So we created a chatbot to help former foster youth in Florida figure out what benefits that they are eligible for. And I think the first question is, why do we need this? And the answer is quite simple. There are approximately 20,000 young people that age out of the, oh, let me go to slideshow. I'll just leave it the way it is. There are approximately 20,000 young people who age out of the foster care system every year, but specifically we wanted to talk about our friends Peter, Paul, and Mary who aged out of Florida. They're triplets. They came into care on their 17th birthday after years of abuse, and they're all placed together in a group home. Unfortunately, right before their 18th birthday, there were some changes in their placement. Peter remains in the group home. Paul gets placed with his godfather, and Mary is reunified with her parents. Why is this important, and why is it important that young people have information about what benefits they're entitled to? Is because those choices have huge impacts on their well-being. Specifically, we find out that Peter is eligible for a whole host of benefits because he remained in a group home. Paul is eligible for some of them, and Mary is eligible for none of them. But what does that actually mean? If we put a monetary value on it, Peter is eligible for somewhere between $75,000 to $150,000 worth of benefits. Paul is eligible for somewhere between $10,000 and $85,000, and Mary is eligible for none. But what is even more important is that word plus, because some of these services have nothing to do with money, but really come into play by providing very technical and supports that help the young people succeed. So how do these kids make the decision without the information? Sometimes they have lawyers, sometimes they don't, and our chatbot is created to resolve that. Over to you, Abhijit.
Thank you, Jessica. Let me share my screen here. If you could make me the presenter. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So we decided to build a chatbot and build it using Dialogflow. The reason for building a chatbot is that it's something that can be accessible and can go where the user is. We can have the chatbot appear in many places. We need to train the chatbot once, as opposed to at this time we have to train multiple staff members many times for these very different program areas that they need to be familiar with. So if we can bring all our knowledge together into one chatbot, then that can be scaled out to help more people who need assistance. Specifically, why we use Dialogflow is it's a Google product, and it is integrated with, it can be integrated with Google Assistant, Amazon Alexa, Facebook Messenger, and many other channels. So we can build it once in Dialogflow and then have it appear in many different places. And finally, conversational user interface is the future. This is where everything is moving. So we wanted to explore this new area and see how it can be applied to the sector of domain of legal services. So the architecture is this: is in the middle we have the Dialogflow agent, which is what a chatbot is. In Dialogflow, it's called an agent. Most of the logic is within the agent. Some logic can be programmed from a different place, which it calls a fulfillment. So this is the project that you heard earlier Gwen present. It's a Drupal module that can respond to information requests from the agent and provide some information back. So this may be additional logic that is stored separately outside of the Dialogflow agent. So Gwen and her team worked on the Drupal module, and we worked on the chatbot along with Brian Dyer Stewart, who worked on both areas. So these are kind of sister projects. And once the chatbot is built, it can then be embedded on websites or on other channels. So this is what the Drupal module sort of looks like on the Drupal side. So the other things that we built was we built an eligibility matrix. And let me pull this up here. So this is the eligibility matrix spreadsheet. Laying out what programs we have over here, for example, aftercare, extended foster care, and so on, and then the parameters that would be used to determine eligibility. So we laid that out in a matrix. The next thing we did was we took this matrix and wrote out a plain language question flow. So it really creates what kind of questions we want to ask, what kind of language we want to use, and we had to refine this to make it use plain language, simple language that anyone can understand. So that was the eligibility matrix, and then the question flow. And then the next thing is that we built the chatbot. So the chatbot kind of looks like this. The interface looks like this in Dialogflow, where you have, excuse my dog. This is the Dialogflow interface. We have things like intents and entities that we use to program this. It's quite complex once you try to translate the matrix and the question flow into this. But this is what it looks like. So here is the chatbot that we built. It is embedded on a website. So this is a regular web page. This is Brian's web page. And here's the chatbot, and we can ask it some questions. So it can say, you know, so there are some parts of it that we are still building on, but this is kind of the way it would be, it would respond. So there are several paths through the dialogues, and we've only built out a few of them. So that's the Dialogflow interface and pathway through this. And yeah, so that's this is the summary of the project that we did. We built in the eligibility matrix, the question flow, and the chatbot. And on request, Brian wrote a song about our experiences, which we'll try to figure out a way to get to you guys pretty soon. But yeah, he wrote a song after he finished coding to express all his experiences in the Hackathon Blues song. So we'll share that with you. So that's the presentation. Moving on to the next project here. Let's see who we have. We have the multi-jurisdiction legal elements library, the legal localization for eviction. So let's change presenters.
All right, Sam.
All right, can y'all hear me?
Yep,
Awesome. Can you see my screen?
we sure can.
Even better. Okay, so I'm Sam Harden. I'm in Tampa, and I was working with Toby on the eviction elements library. So I'm going to go through a little slideshow here. Loading. There we go. All right, so the problem that we set out to solve is that I'm sure everybody's familiar with the Eviction Lab project, and we're starting to see eviction cases more as an epidemic across America than just isolated incidents. And so there's been increasing interest in responding to eviction cases and ramping up efforts, especially on the tech side, for chatbots, document builders, pro bono projects, that sort of thing. But the problem is there's no centralized repository for elements for fighting an eviction, for requirements for an eviction case, for requirements for affirmative defenses or motions to determine rent or a motion to dismiss. So we set out to build a web-based knowledge management system based on a platform that I've been developing on the side in my spare time, called Finch, and we've adapted it for eviction cases and elements of eviction cases so that advocates and people interested in building tools to help people can go to a resource and find the materials they need in order to actually build the tools that help people. Basically, we want to build the foundation that lets people build the tools necessary. So the application consists of two big parts. One is a legal elements library. We call it the knowledge base, and it's a centralized repository for sharing knowledge about how to handle eviction cases, for triggers and responses and affirmative defenses, or motion practice or practice guides. And then a knowledge sharing system where people can start discussions about topics or ask questions or things like that. This section uses the natural language toolkit, that's NLTK, which is a machine learning library to source other relevant discussions that have already been entered into the system and bring those back so that everything gets linked and you can browse through and find what you need to find. The system also has an API. Our idea is once this system gets up and running fully and people can use it, then let people building things like chatbots or doc assemble projects use the API to access those elements instead of having to just transpose them by hand, have an address that they can hit and pull like a statute or responses or affirmative defenses down into their own system. So now I'm going to switch over here and demo it a little bit. Y'all can still see my screen. This is the home page of the application, and this is the discussion section. You can see each little panel is a discussion. So we'll take a look at this first one. And this is one that I entered about mobile home parks and a case that I found. It uses Fastcase's API once you put in a case citation to actually link to that case and pull it down. And so you can see related, it doesn't have any related discussions over there. So we can put in one here. So we'll start a discussion. And so we'll just, you can choose a knowledge base item here. We'll just do one at random. That would be affirmative defenses, I suppose. And we'll save it. And so it's entered into the system. And as soon as I reload it, it should, there we go, related discussions. No, it's not finding any. So you can see it'll link everything. So it's linked to a knowledge base item, which is a Florida statute in a certain area and authored by me. So we'll go to that knowledge base item there. And there's the Florida statute. And we can see the linked discussions. There's the discussion I just entered on that. So go back to discussions. You can upload files as well. So this is a sample eviction answer. I think this is a Word document that you can download. And then there's a PDF. It'll load the PDFs automatically in there. And then users can comment on it and start discussion threads down below as well. So we'll go over to the knowledge base system or side of it. So these are the knowledge base items that we put into the system so far, grouped by statutes, elements, practice guides, and grounds. So we'll take a look at the discrimination element there. And I think this is one that Toby put in, and you can see that it's got a trigger to it and then an explanation. And it does have some discussions around it. So there, those are all linked. So you can also create a knowledge base item and categorize it by type area, all these good things. And again, the system tries to interrelate everything so that nothing exists really in isolation. That if you put something in, you can see everything else that's related to it. Because once the system gets more and more and more content, then it's going to, it'll be super powerful once all that stuff is interlinked. And I'll give you a sample of the API. This is in JSON, JavaScript object notation with the API call. Up at the top, you can see statute, state, and then chapter and subchapter, or chapter and section, and then API. And then if we just do all of them, take the numbers out, then you can see all of the Florida statutes that have been entered into the system. So, and Toby was working on a DocAssemble project based on the elements entered into the Finch system already, and this is his DocAssemble project built on that. So you can see how a community advocate or an attorney, building one of these projects can use this material to build something else. And again, our idea is to build the foundation for this, not just to build something discrete, but to build a system that other people can use to build their own systems. So planned features that we have going forward is to build an export feature where someone can export a knowledge base item into DocAssemble or Q&A markup, or use the API fully for users of the system to be able to get email notifications when someone comments on a post that they make, or if they say, I want to know anything about mobile home park evictions, then they'll get an email when one of those discussions happens in their jurisdiction. And then improve the machine learning system for sourcing related discussions and knowledge base items. So does anybody have any questions? I think we're saving questions
at the end.
Cool.
Let's take questions. Let's move on to our next project. This is the Eviction Fighter chatbot. The presenter will be Ken Johnson. Ken Johnson. Let's have Ken Johnson become the presenter.
Ken, are you there?
Yeah, do you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, let me go ahead then. So our project is the Eviction Fighter chatbot, and this is based on Kentucky. So this has been built specifically for Kentucky law. So this is just a quick stat about eviction in America. It's rising extremely quickly. But the real issue here and the real problem is that nationwide standardization is not possible. Eviction laws differ by state, so trying to make a single solution is very difficult without actually knowing the law of each state. So the approach that when I started this, I came at it from was to research the law of Kentucky very specifically for all the reasons for eviction, all the defenses. So it's based heavily on state-specific research. I wrote it up more as an outline before actually even doing anything technical. We used a logic tree map. So this is a little less high tech. Instead of being more of an AI thing, it's all very logically based, all hard written in. So instead of using natural language processing, the core really is all based on just a question and answer. Do you have this? Do you have that? Here's the answer, and here's your new options format. Just to make sure that we're covered, it's based, asked the Kentucky Bar Association through the ethics hotline in 2017 to see if this was going to create an attorney-client relationship because of the issues that could raise for anyone even hosting the bot. Once it was approved, it was found, at least in the form we're using and basing our development on, to not create a further relationship. As a tool for litigation, it's intended for pro se litigants primarily to teach them their rights, but also to help legal aid and other eviction defense attorneys, especially people who, just as you all know, just because you're a lawyer is not going to mean you know all the law. So if you practice in one area and you want to help someone out, you're going to need a quick primer just like any other person. There's also an idea to use this as a legislative tool. So that means to advocate, because in Kentucky we have two systems. There's the Uniform Residential Landlord Tenant Act, which offers more protections, it's more standardized and based on the national URLTA. And then in the rest of the state, it's based more on common law. So the idea is to put this in front of decision makers as well as in front of practitioners so that they can actually see how easily one little difference in where you live can change whether you're homeless or not tonight after that hearing. So our team, we have a Q&A markup version, which is the more strict logic tree. We have dialogue flow, which is integrating more natural language processing, and chat fuel, which is also smarter and works on Facebook. So here's just here's some examples of how it works on each platform. And then this is the demonstration. So you can see the beginning is just, it's going to tell you specifically, here is what it's for. It's only for eviction, but also make sure that you consult an attorney or somewhere in legal aid if you need any help. So let's say for right now, Kentucky. These are the 17 communities in Kentucky that use URLTA right now. The rest of the state does not. So let's say you live in Louisville. Okay, do you have a landlord trying to evict you? Yes. They claim you did not pay rent on time. If the answer is yes, the next question is, did you pay rent? Now let's say you didn't pay rent and your reason is the late fees were not reasonable. So now it's going to tell you the way the law works, but also what your rights are going to be in court. So even if you lose, you can't be evicted without a court order. You need to know what your rights are, even if you do lose. If they try to change the locks, there are criminal penalties possibly for the landlord. The first step they need to know is going through notice. There's going to be a 7-day period. Then you have a chance to cure. Now, I've tried to put this all in normal standard English, but it won't, it's also, you're probably at least going to want to talk to someone usually. But the idea is to just show you, it walks you through the process all the way from first complaint through the summons through the hearing. For the future, we're looking at expanding this to more states, to also partner with legal aid and legal justice organizations so people can use it more easily. And now that we have a working dialogue flow version, we can use it on Google Assistant. So there is a voice interface that we want to polish further in the future. And here's our links if you want to get to it. And that's it for now.
Thank you, Ken. The next presentation is on, let's see, we have the DocAssemble template builder, and the presenter is going to be Quentin. So, Quentin, are you ready to present? This project is using DocAssemble to build a DocAssemble template using Microsoft Word add-in.
So our team was myself, Quentin Stainhouse from Greater Boston Legal Services, Rina Padua, and Leon Hattori from the Brazilian legal technology firm Linte. And what we built is a a tool to help the helpers, people who create templates using DocAssemble, create guided interviews using DocAssemble. And what document assembly is and what DocAssemble does is basically what TurboTax does for the 1040 form. Takes a really complex, dense form and uses a series of easy to answer questions to help you fill out that form. Our product is a Word add-in. So it's something that you actually can install and use when you're using Microsoft Word to help you with the process of marking up the text that you want to change in the template that's going to be filled in by the questions that are asked in the interview itself. It's a tool that really helps make it faster, easier, and more accurate for a template author. Someone's going to create these easy-to-use interviews. The new Microsoft Word add-in model that we took advantage of is basically just a web page that's hosted inside Microsoft Word. So we're able to use basic web technology like JavaScript and HTML, some elements from the Microsoft Fabric UI, which are easy to use components that look a little bit nicer to change the style of the tool. And we used Figma as a mock-up aid to help us design. This is one of the mock-ups that we created in Figma right here when we were thinking about what we wanted the add-in to do. The main features that we thought would be really useful for people who are creating templates for DocAssemble were to be able to sync a template back and forth very easily between the website that hosts DocAssemble and the local computer where you're working on the template, being able to add variables, and to be able to insert documents into your template. To a quick demo, the actual tool. So as I said, this is a tool that works both in Microsoft Word locally, and here it is. And it also works in Word Online. And let me show you what we're really talking about, why this is useful. This is what a template looks like that's already been created in DocAssemble with the DocAssemble format. There's a lot of really complicated code that you have to remember and type exactly right each time. Let's just do a demonstration with a file we might want to turn into a template. This is a motion to dismiss. Let's say we wanted to take the name Tobias Funke throughout our document. I think it appears 3 times here. And replace that with the DocAssemble variable, which we're going to call tenant.name. So we have the option either to replace it one time or replace it every time that it appears. We can apply some text formats to it if we want. When we're ready with our options, we click Insert Variable. And it's been replaced throughout the document. We don't have to worry about doing a typo one of the times that we did that. Another really common scenario in a template would be to create conditional text using branch logic. So let's say that we only wanted this item number 1 to appear if defense 1 was true. If the user answered questions in the interview that indicated that they had defense 1. We just type in the variable name. We click a button to mark that with the correct code to make it only appear if that defense 1 is true. One of the tricky things that comes up sometimes is creating lists. If you have like a checklist and certain defenses are going to be true and certain ones aren't, it's something you can really easily generate in DocAssemble, but then turning it back into the template can be tricky to get that syntax just right and to remember it. So we have a shortcut for that as well. And it can look different depending on the options you choose. So you see here, there's slightly different options that we would have. The last thing that, two more features that we were able to build out during the hackathon, adding a template, a child template. So often you want to have repeated text through multiple different templates. And instead of redoing those each time, you can put it in its own document and then just include it into the bigger document. So like a signature block, for example. really saves that time for the author from having to type that in, and again, saving them from having to make any mistakes. As you're working in a longer template like the one that I was showing earlier, sometimes you want to test it and find where you made mistakes in the code. So you want to be able to turn on comments easily to remove that section so it's not acted on by the template engine. And that's another one of the features that we have, and those can be turned on and off. That's what we were able to achieve so far. Our next goals include adding some other features like the syntax highlighting, so that when you're looking at the template, all of the text that is a code that is going to be understood by DocAssemble is marked visually. Being able to sync the template with the DocAssemble playground, and we had the DocAssemble author was working on that in parallel with our hackathon project, and that's something that we think we could be able to do really soon. And then a really obvious next step would be able to pull down a list of variables. So as you're working, instead of having to type the variable in, as we do here, you could actually just choose from a list of the variables that are in your interview to make that, again, much more easier and more accurate. You can use this add-in now. We're hoping to publish it to the Microsoft Store in the next, when it's more feature complete. But you can load it very easily in Microsoft Word Online, as I've done here. I'll even show you how to do it because it's very quick. Just click the add-ins button and then upload the add-in, which is linked to from our GitHub page. I've downloaded it here already. And all of our code is licensed under the MIT open source license. That's it.
Thank you, Quentin. Our next presentation is the project for building a browser extension to share projects, and the presenter is Eduardo Gonzalez. Eduardo?
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what we were able to accomplish today, my group is Stefan Tillman, myself. I have a friend, Jordan Place, who didn't register for the Legal Aid Hackathon, but he helped with some consulting a few weeks back, and then with some advice and consultation from Catherine Alternator, who helped me design some of the project field inputs that I'll be explaining soon. But I was able to generate a prototype using InVision, which is sort of a software that lets you create panels and then link them through interaction so you can show off what an interface might look like. And I'll show what the interface would be for the browser extension once it was created. And so I've shared the link, and you can find it either on Trello or I can email it to you. But it loads like this, and this is what you would see as the extension that would come out from the top of your browser. And ideally, this would be on any browser, but for now, I'm using a Chrome browser to see it. So you would get the Justice Reach, and this is the name of the extension menu. You would either create a profile or log in with an existing profile, and it would take you to the actual board. And this is what primarily you would see in the extension. And so the features that I'll be explaining are these listed here. The idea being that you have very few options and very quick ones to either post a new project that maybe you want to contribute or add to the database, to update a project that you might want to change a status or a stage level, or to include resources. You can browse projects that are in the database, and then the workshop would give you some sort of functionality around editing, publicizing, or giving notifications to people who would follow you. And this project feed would be like any sort of Twitter or RSS feed based on the projects that you want to follow or get updates on. This would be a sort of quick list for what those new updates and announcements would be. And so in the post new project, you would get what would look like a survey, and I have pulled the survey up here. There are 16 questions that each are collected in columns in a database, and they provide information about the organization that's managing it, the type of organization that is managing the project, including project manager information, a link to the project, start and end dates, description of the project, including the stage in which the project is in, so that you can identify maybe projects that have matured, are already managed, or are in pilot phases. I've included case type, and this tool would obviously allow other users to include more case types. There's a service type, and this is sort of major categories of the type of projects that you might be creating, whether it's forms, advice, courtroom services, information diagnostic, or any other type of category that might not be included in those topics. The delivery type is also useful for us to know, since in-person would be sort of interacting face-to-face with somebody, while remote would be a different sort of access. So whether you have forms online or you have forms at an organization or a legal aid organization, that would be useful to filter by later. There's a type of funding that you're getting, the jurisdiction level that you're targeting, including the number of partners that are helping you on the project. And if you are working with somebody, what types of organizations are working with you. And the idea being that you would be able to put these projects in a database, and then the tool would be able to query it, and the query would be this just generic database that gets exported through the survey feature, and it would have all the information that gets asked, and the extension would then be able to find the project with your unique ID that you are working on and let you update it. And the browser might have maybe quick links to specifically changing one of the information types or fields. And the browser would let you then filter by those question types. So based on the category that I've described here, you could filter for projects that fit within these filters. And then that would hopefully allow the user of the extension to follow certain projects that they want to track. Maybe it's of a specific type of project, like a forms project that you want to follow in maybe the location or near you or in the state that you're in. And then the feed would show off either updates to the projects or notices to the project that you can immediately hit and get information about. But together, that would be the browser. You'd have a project library that shows the types of projects that maybe you have posted or that you are following. And so this would be a quick place for you to access the data that gets put into the actual tool. And the database could be released on an open source basis, so that any organization that wants to run analysis on the types of projects that are being created, maybe the categories of projects, or just be able to filter through the information that gets put here, could easily access it, run analytics on it, or import it into client resource managers or other sorts of platforms that might give you more insights about projects that are happening in the space. And if Stefan is able or unmuted, maybe he could help me explain the technical piece of how the extension will be able to talk to that database to be able to display this sort of interface.
Thank you. Let's go on to the next presentation, and this is the ethics and privacy presentation by Sartro. Sart.
Excellent, welcome. Thank you so much for putting this on for the weekend. Let me get this to full screen and let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Excellent. My name is Sartro. I'm over at Northwest Justice Project, and what I worked on today was privacy policies, actually the last 2 days, for legal services organizations. Right now is really the ideal time to look at this. People care about it a lot. And although this quote from Senator Bill Nelson really emphasizes the need for social media companies to look at privacy very closely, us in legal services have a lot of client data, and we're even partnering with these social media companies in finding ways to give legal information and legal answers. Although I don't normally recommend reading law review articles unless you want help sleeping, I strongly recommend The Right to Privacy, Warren and Brandeis, because it's still relevant today and is where a lot of our privacy rights come from. But for a more modern kind of overview of why this is so important, I also recommend looking at the 2011 settlement with the FTC and Facebook. It has some very, very simple things that come out of it. Number one, you need clear and prominent notice. Number two, you need express consent before sharing information beyond the privacy settings. And number three, you have to have a comprehensive privacy program to protect consumers' information. And this is very different than the way most privacy policies are written. Most privacy policies look at it from the company's perspective, not from the individual user rights perspective. And finally, the need to audit from independent third parties. Are you actually keeping things secure and private? Senator John Kennedy was very critical of Facebook's user agreements and how those were written from the traditional perspective of covering yourself, and said, go back home and rewrite it in English. Fortunately, we have a wonderful tool from the community, Write Clearly, that helps enable us to rewrite these types of policies in ways that our end users can see them. And really, Pew Internet Research firm has shown that what people are looking for in a privacy policy is some assurance that their information is actually being kept confidential, which is very different than how the policies currently act. I also really encourage people to take a look at what's going on in the EU with the general data protection regulations. The emphasis on these really has that companies are no longer to use these long, illegible terms and conditions, that users should have the right to be able to pull their data out of the system, which is very parallel to what we have in law, is the ability to let people ask for their case files or other information, but also to make it interoperable in case they want to go somewhere else. And this is super relevant in legal aid, because most of the individuals have multiple legal problems, and we're asking them to enter their data several times in different case management systems. We've seen some good grants before that try to make that easier to transfer between, but we don't have a great data standard. Additionally, there should be a right to remove information from the system when it is no longer relevant. Most organizations have a destruction policy with regards to physical files, but those files kept on Facebook or those files kept in shared drives or other places don't always get covered. We have a great set of principles that came out recently, and they're in their kind of third version for looking at due process and ethics in kind of the age of artificial intelligence. And principle 1, part 2, has in there that end users should be informed of any rights they're giving up by voluntarily engaging in programs. Beyond that, I'm suggesting that we might want to add in there something that end users should also be informed of their rights. The Washington State Access to Justice Technology Court rules, which are currently a draft, have explicit callouts for safety and for privacy protection. I looked at several different privacy policies, and out of that, I've distilled some best practices. 1, write in plain language. And a great resource for this is usability.gov that make things short, scannable, and useless. Additionally, call out the people that you're partnering with, because they're going to use your user data in different ways than you do. Try to put some visual icons. This is an example from Mozilla's Privacy Icon project that shows a data retention policy. Is it 3 months or is it indefinite? We don't need to just write paragraphs. We need to make it visual for people. Also, put in a section on information security. What are we doing to protect their data? Do we have multi-factor authentication? Are we using SSAs? What are the protocols for accessing information? And then we should look towards things like Facebook's privacy check checkup, which is improving, to show people what their rights are, to view the data we have about them, to export that data, to delete that data, and to edit or correct that data. The next step for this is we're going to be doing a sample privacy policy for legal services organizations. There's a link here that currently is an outline of all the different areas we would like, and then a policy creation tool that lets you choose which of the particular terms are useful to you. We're looking for a public-private partnership to help with that second part. But currently, that tool or the outline is up and available for individuals to look at. And anyone who has that link from the slides, which I will also drop into the chat, can look at this and start to build it out. But the foundation for it is half-page visual summary using icons, a commitment to our client's privacy, and then a detailed list of the different areas privacy related that each individual organization deals with. Thank you so much for the opportunity to work on this over this weekend. I also want to thank Ket Ning from Northwest Justice Project. Look forward to working on this project more and coming up with something extremely useful to people.
Thank you very much, Sart. Moving on to the next project, we have a Drupal 8 distribution for legal aid organizations. And the presenter is Christy Lowe's. And just we're on the top of the hour, so we're running behind schedule, so please bear with us as we try to get through all these excellent presentations.
Hi, I'm Christy Leos, and our project is Drupal 8 distribution for legal aid organizations. I worked with Sam Tate, Mike Lotz, Elijah Townsend, and Jeff Aresti. So before we jump into the solution, what we did was we surveyed legal aid subject matter experts, and here were a few responses, some of which we've seen repeatedly, and they're understandable. Technology needing to be more user-friendly, more easily updatable, accessible, affordable options for document management, especially when you're working on multiple work sites, and then, of course, automation and more convenient ways to conduct interagency referrals. As for our target audience, the legal aid community is made up of a wide range of users. While a lot of projects focus on the public and the clients and the citizens, and rightfully so, my team and I would like to build a resource to aid those who administer legal aid. So what is distribution? Distribution provides site features and functions in a single download with Drupal core, modules, etc., which makes it easy to set up a complex system in a few steps. So what was our objective? Our objective was to build a pre-configured Drupal 8 distro that any legal aid organization could download and use on their website. This site would include modern tech and content specific for the community. What our team was able to accomplish in the 2 days was working on the Drupal core 8.5.3, responsive design based on the US web design system. We were able to input the ability to post content to external websites and applications such as JusticeHub.tools. This is referred to as headless Drupal. We were able to add third-party integrations such as a chatbot, Google Analytics and Fusion tables, web forms, and out-of-the-box content pages. So, introducing Civ Aid. And so we did post on GitHub, but I will take us to a quick demo. Okay, so this is the site, and as you can see, it came with pre-made content. On the bottom right-hand corner, we have the chatbot, which I will use quickly. So what type of legal aid are you looking for? We'll say eviction. So it's asking for basic info. Okay, and email. Okay, and that was a very short conversation, but we're sure as the project goes along, we'll be able to add more robust pieces. So other than the chatbot and the content that comes with the site, I wanted to take y'all to the project section. And so here's a list of projects, but I'm going to click on View JSON Feed. And so basically what we've done here is we've converted content on our website to be fetchable by other websites. It's a create once, publish everything model. The problem this approach solves is the issue of chasing down project submissions for sites like justicehub.tools. Anyone who uses this distro will have this functionality outside the box, or out of the box. Let me take us back to this. Okay, and full screen. Okay, and so the project timeline. So as soon as the hackathon is over, this month we will be finalizing the site content and the documentation. In June, submitting to Drupal.org as an official distro, and then finally in July, promoting within the legal aid community, whether it's in this hackathon channel or for on justicehub.tools, ESSA, but just so many different groups who could use this. And thank you.
Thank you, Christy. The next last project, I think we have just one left for presentation, and this is the reminders and guided steps for required check-ins with caseworker. And the presenter is going to be Tatiana.
All right.
Hi.
Hello. We hear you.
So I am currently in class, so I'm doing this blind from memory. So excuse me if I am off a page or two. But the challenge that I chose was for the case manager check-in app. I was in child welfare for 6 years, so it's kind of close to my heart being a case manager previously and having a case manager friends. So I know the daily struggle from both work interacting with parents and being a case manager is that depending on the county, sometimes it's difficult for contact. And with the mandate being every 2 weeks that the parent needs to keep contact with their case manager, technology can help automate that greatly by the use of the app I created. It's a web app. So on the first page, the parent would just go to the website and create an account. From there, the next page will let them choose their case management organization, and that information will bind with their account. So because usually the case management organization or the county of jurisdiction does not change unless there's a special case. So once that is selected, the next page will go to a form that allows them to input their name, their address, their phone number. A lot of our cases in the two counties that I worked in, based on the legal system, went by the child's name. So just for the ease of use for the case management organization, I have them put the associated oldest child for the case, so they can easily look it up. And so once they fill out the rest of the form and pick their username and password, they can create the account. And once that's selected, they would go into the main portion of the app. This is what they'll see on a biweekly basis. So if they were coming in from the point of logging in instead of creating an account, it would go straight to this page where they can confirm that this is their address. If it's not their address, they can change their address. If it is the correct address and they haven't moved, they can just hit confirm. then goes to the next page being their phone number. If their phone number has changed, they can edit it. If it has not changed, they can confirm it. And then once they do those two things, it would go to the barriers. So I put typical barriers that I found as a case manager with a lot of my parents that they had. And I left a spot for other, so they can leave in the blank. I left a spot for if they were hospitalized, they could put the name of the hospital, so the case manager organization can get the records from that hospital. Once that is completed, they would just hit submit, and the final page shows just the confirmation of all the information. If everything is correct, they can go and just hit submit, and that will generate an email to the case management organization. And usually for the case management organizations that I've worked with, it's rather easy for them to create a centralized email account to receive those types of emails. And then because of the high turnover with case management, sometimes the person that starts off with the case is not necessarily the person that ends the case. So it will allow them to distribute it to whomever is on the case. And if they would like to forward that information to the guardian ad litem, to any attorney or anyone else who's legally allowed to get that information, they have that option to send it to them, but it's in a centralized place. And in the future, it can, instead of doing SMS texting, they can possibly choose the option to make it a progressive web app, which means that the application is still on the internet, but it stays on the person's phone. So they can push notifications that way. So it looks like a icon, but it actually just goes, the button just goes to the web page. Any questions?
Or that was the last presentation, I believe. So we can go right into the question answer session, open for all projects. Meanwhile, I think Joseph, would you be able to lead our judges into the?
Yes.
Unless the judges have some questions right now here, we can start with that, and when you're ready, you can move to the other meeting. So any questions from the judges?
Amber, did you have a question?
I do. For the chatbot for youth aging out of foster care, once you get through that, does it send you to services or just gives you information on what you're eligible for?
I think Jessica should take this question. Jessica?
I think our suggestion was that after they go through the questions, they'd be sent, they'd get a list of, based on what you answered, here is what you're eligible for, here are the links to the folks that you can access those services. In addition, if they were not eligible for any of those services, we didn't want to give them a hard no. Then the answer would be, no, you're not eligible for these, but here are some other services that you may be eligible for, and here are links to those services, because we think that these are the most vulnerable youth.
Okay, thank you.
I had a couple of questions. One was on the multi-jurisdictional elements for eviction. Did you have an outreach plan so that you would get a critical mass of people using it?
Hi, this is Sam. We haven't formulated an outreach plan as of yet. Ideally, we would have, like, in my mind, like one legal aid organization, use it so that we could refine it further and then promote it from there. So that we get, we iron out some of the kinks that I would suspect are still inherent in the system.
Okay, I got you. And then on the Drupal 8 distribution, I'm curious as to how this differs or improves upon Open Advocate, which is already in Drupal and available to the programs?
Christy, do you have thoughts on that?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So I unfortunately am not the legal aid subject matter expert or the coder. So I don't know if I can really touch on it, but if you could maybe go into a little more detail about Open Advocate, and maybe I can jump off of that with an answer.
Well, I mean, this is something that Abhijit and his group has developed through a TIG grant, which is available for any legal aid program in the country. We've done, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of development on this particular Drupal platform. And then it's also being used by some of the courts like in Virginia. So I just was curious what the need case was for another Drupal distribution.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, well, I don't really have an answer for that. Sorry.
All right, thanks.
This is Judy. I had a question for Tatiana. Is there a functionality that will allow the agency to respond back?
Sam, you may. I don't know if it's still with us.
I'm running a speakerphone into my microphone here, so I apologize. Can you ask the question again?
Sure. On the reminders and guided steps, is there a functionality whereby the agency can respond back to the individual who's reporting in, or is it only one way?
It would be only one way, because if there's any issues or any barriers that they need to address, the case manager would be the one to contact the person.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that same project?
Sure.
Sure.
I wanted to know whether it'd be possible for the parents that are responding to actually add their specific case plan tasks, because some of the things that I've seen is that parents aren't very clear on what's required of them. Is there a way to maybe beef up their profile?
Okay, so I actually did think about that portion as well, because I see this as a potential resource for parents possibly getting their case plan uploaded to the site. Case plans are supposed to be individualized, so there aren't going to be quote unquote standard tasks. So each one is supposed to be specifically written for that person. So hypothetically, what that would look like is they would have to, someone would have to upload it for them, or they would choose to upload a copy of it for their account.
Thank you.
All right, do the judges have any more questions?
I had one more question for doc assembly. Is there a barrier to getting individuals trained to use the system, or how do you all plan to help them use that in a way that's easy?
Yeah, good question. So there's the creator has created a lot of really useful help documentation, and one of the things we didn't have time to finish in this project was pulling that into the add-in as well, so you can see that as you're creating the template. And another project that Rena and I worked on a few months ago was to create some tutorials, guides to help people get started. At Greater Boston Legal Services, we're actually trying to train some non-technical staff how to use it as well. And there's a lot of interest because people can see right away how it will help them speed up their work. And that's one of the motivations for this tool, is to make it a little bit more accessible to actually do the work once you get the concepts and have a basic idea, without making errors.
Thank you.
Okay, Joseph, this is Glenn. I had one more question. On the browser extension, I may have missed it, but I didn't see a spot where you enter a description of the project as you went through. I saw a name and all the contributor information, but I didn't actually see a description field. Did I miss it?
Sure. And in the survey, the question that's there at the bottom is that it does ask for a description of the project here. And so the person can describe the project using whatever means they want. A lot of the description is sort of embedded into the other questions, and there's a link. So if you have maybe a web page somewhere that describes the project in more detail, it would be in the database. But you can also just pull a quick description here in one of the input questions. So when you hit the post new project, you get that query.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from the judges?
I had one more question on the eviction fighter. Is there going to be it was described as also being a legislative tool, and I'm wondering if there's going to be any sort of automatic build of data for purposes of that legislative component and policy backing component?
Just so I heard right, you're at an automatic, sort of like an automatic building to it?
Yes.
I would like to have that. So regardless of whether or not it's sort of automated right off the cuff, that I can't necessarily say, but I do want to integrate more of kind of a legislative side to it or a branch to it, because I feel like it's as important as it is, and it very much is, to work on the litigation side, to have a strategy on the legislative side and on the policymaking side. That is an opportunity really to take some of the pressure off of legal aid organizations while also improving people's lives before it even gets to this kind of confrontational point. So absolutely, whether or not it's automated, I want to have legislative and policymaking branch to this.
Thank you.
Judges, any further questions? Okay, well, judges, if you can mute yourselves, I'll now start a conference line for you all. And Abhijit, you and the participants can have an open discussion about the projects.
We have results are in, and so I'll hand it over to Joseph. Joseph, you can start out perhaps by mentioning our sponsor and then go into the results.
Yes, our sponsor for the awards, which the winning team gets, each participant gets a Google Home Mini, and they are of course free to develop applications for that Google Home Mini, is from LawDroid, and LawDroid is a chatbot consulting company. So perhaps on a project that you have for a chatbot, you may want to consult with them. And now I will hand it over to Glenn, or I should say Amber, I think, that is going to present the awards.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all, first of all, for taking a weekend to work on some really amazing projects. We need all of these projects in the field, and we're really excited for what you all did within a weekend. Excited about you all doing your next steps and looking forward to hearing about how these projects continue to evolve. So with all that being said, there can only be two winners. However, we did want to give two honorable mentions to first the multi-jurisdictional legal elements for eviction. We really love the way that that project integrated the information and provided a platform that we see will have a great impact in the field. So thank you all for that. The second project is the browser extension to share projects. That's something that's also needed. People need to know what's going on so they can collaborate as well as see what they can potentially use in their jurisdiction. So we want to say both of those honorable mentions. So thank you both for that. I'll start backwards. So second place goes to the ethics and privacy best practices. It was really interesting that this wasn't necessarily technology, but this is innovation, and hackathons aren't always based on a technology platform, but it's something that all technologies on the platform, or all the technologies that were presented today, they need something like this to make sure we're sharing data in a way that makes sense. And we've heard in the bill that people need templates for this. So second place goes to ethics and privacy best practices. First place, drum roll please, is the chatbot for youth aging out of foster care. We're really confetti, virtual confetti and balloons and everything. But we're really impressed with what you all did with that system, understanding that that is a huge need for individuals who are aging out of foster care because they don't know their rights. So once again, thank you all for that, and congratulations to all the winners. Thank you, everyone, for all the work you've done this weekend. This was a pleasure to be able to judge, and my colleagues feel the same way. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Really good projects. It always makes our job as judges very hard, which is very good to see. So I, too, want to thank you all for your participation.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be a part of it.